Hey everyone, welcome to this video tutorial. I want to share with you a really good answer from Education 2019 paper 1. It is on ethnicity and educational achievement. So what do you need to do to get a top band answer? It's always really good to check out the mark scheme, in specific the top band, to see exactly what the examiner wants you to see. You need to make sure that you have good knowledge, conceptually detailed, so not always names but more like viewpoints, explanations and as many sociological words as possible. Make sure that you're getting that AO2, that this knowledge is applied, and this means linking back to the question, or LBTQ for short. In every paragraph state why is it relevant to the question being asked. In this case it is being asked about specific ethnic groups. And lastly, analysis and evaluation, which is explicit and relevant, not just bolted on, shoved on at the end. It links to the point that you've just made, so you understand how the factors also interlink and the interrelationship between them. Finish off your answer with a distinct and an appropriate conclusion. So let's check out the question from summer 2019. It was A-level paper 1, question 4. And it's asking you to evaluate the sociological explanations of the differences between ethnic groups. So put simply, reading between the lines of the item, they want you to show them that you know the different levels of achievement between the different ethnic groups. So don't just group them all together. They also want you to examine possible explanations from home background. And these are things such as material or cultural factors and even racism within wider society, and then also the in-school factors also, such as labelling, institutional racism and the ethnocentric curriculum. They also mention ethnic groups as a collective. They do this quite a few times, but what the examiner really wants to see is that you understand that not all ethnic groups are underachievers. Some are high achievers also, so make sure you make the distinction between them, such as your Indian, Chinese, Bangladesh, Pakistan and black students, and explicitly link to their achievement. They also want to see that you understand that there is an in-school and external factors are often influenced. There's an interrelationship between the two. So what we're going to do is we'll have a look at a student answer and see how they do this. So let's start off with an introduction. It's not essential, but it is a really good way to start writing your answer, and it also maps out how you're going to answer this question. So this student starts off by actually just stating what is the achievement of the ethnic groups, and they basically just rank them. So Chinese and Indian are the highest achievers, white students are on average, and the black, African and Caribbean, Bangladesh and Pakistan students are the lowest achievers, and they just recognise that they are caused by either external or internal factors, but also it could be a combination of both. So looking at the student answer, so I'm going to give you two student answers, one which is an external factor and one which is an internal factor, and show you how they answer it. So they follow really good structure. So they always have AO1 to start, a bit of AO2, analysis and evaluation. So this student starts off with the sociological explanation. So they're using the wording of the question, and they use the item, the role of the home. They talk about there being a lack of cultural capital, referencing Bordeaux, and talking about that these ethnic groups may lack this not just because of a lack of resources, material deprivation, but there is a cultural difference between what's happening at home and with the school. They use the example of Bernstein and the restricted and elaborate speech code, but they become more explicit to ethnicity by using Bowker's research into the lack of linguistic development of black and Asian students. They have this struggle within school, they're not able to communicate with the teachers, and they're often accused, in particular black students, of being aggressive, and Asian students are often ignored from classroom discussions. So we've got a little bit of analysis there that we're not assuming that all ethnic groups are treated the same, but they'll have different experiences within school. Troyner and Williams argues that there is a speech hierarchy within the education system, that teachers value the middle class elaborate speech code the highest, and the restricted speech codes of black speech as the lowest. And then we've got this clear application to educational underachievement And this student finishes at the end by saying, however, the Swan report found that language is not a major factor. Indian students do outperform other students despite not having English as a first language. So following that same structure, let's have a look at an example of a paragraph which starts with an internal factor. So we're following the same structure again. We start off with the item, so another explanation within school is the ethnocentric curriculum. This student is quite clever because what they did was that they linked it from another topic, the policies topic, to show that they understood that within 1988 Education Reform Act, a national curriculum was introduced, and what the aim was of that curriculum was that everybody was taught the same subject and it was teaching a shared culture to everyone. You could even link into the new right view of education, and it was this conservative idea of having that shared curriculum. Ball found this alienates ethnic minorities, and what they did was that he gives the example of history and how history, which is teaching the age of empire and past glories of the British Empire, actually ignores the history of Black and Asian students. So again, we're being specific to ethnicity. Some argue that leads to low self-esteem of Black students. Rather than feeling included in the history, they are marginalised. We've got the explicit link to achievement, so this may lead to the underachievement of Black and Asian students. And then we finish with the evaluation. Some argue that Black students are not suffering low self-esteem, and this explanation also struggles to explain the high achievement of some Asian students, Chinese and Indian, despite Asian culture being ignored within the curriculum. The student then just finishes off this paragraph by suggesting that the government have attempted to raise the awareness of Black culture by having Black History Month, for example. There are other explanations that you could include in an answer like this. So you could have more internal factors, so labelling, setting and streaming, institutional racism, so your assessment game, the new IQism, marginalisation of ethnic groups from the Gifted and Intelligent programme, and the impact of marketisation. Or there's also some external factors, cultural deprivation, material deprivation and racism within wider society. The big tip is just make sure that you are being explicit to the ethnic group and their achievements. So basically, are they passing or failing? Now remember, a lot of these explanations will appear in the class topic, and you want to avoid going down a class and achievement answer. You want to make it specific to ethnicity. So your final paragraph should be a conclusion, and this is essential for the top band. So make sure that it's reasoned, come to some sort of judgment. So this student starts off by saying internal and external factors do have an impact on the achievement of these different ethnic groups. They are not separate, they should not be seen in isolation, that your internal and externals are interlinked. Likewise, the underachievement of Black, Bangladesh and Pakistan students are often located within the poorest and marginalised groups within society. So we shouldn't also ignore the impact of class and gender on achievement of those groups. So this student has a clear introduction. You've seen two examples of some of the main paragraphs that they included, but you should be aiming for about 5 or 6 paragraphs or 5 or 6 explanations, a mixture of internal and external, and a clear conclusion. As you can see with the paragraphs, the structure was consistent, so the skills were equally balanced throughout, and the full answer achieved 29 out of 30. And I've just linked it back to the mark scheme to show why they did achieve that high grade. So looking at the examiner report, it's always really important to check out the examiner report. It gives you a really good insight about how you should be approaching these answers. And as you can see, the majority of students were able to have a solid answer, and they could talk about both internal and external factors and how it impacted the achievement of the different ethnic groups. The majority of students were able to use the item effectively. They picked out the same hooks that our students picked out, so home and family and factors within school, and they had really good conceptually detailed knowledge. Now, what's really interesting is what did the stronger answers or the better answers did. So the better answers were having good explanations presented analytically, so they unpack the explanations, they break it down into the steps, and they identified specific ethnic groups rather than seeing ethnicity as one altogether. And your better answers were able to explain who were your high achieving ethnic groups and who were your low achieving ethnic groups. And the really best answers could show very specific evaluation and how the factors were interlinked, the internal and the external. And they give an example of it here, so how your language barriers at home could have an impact in the way that students were treated within the classroom. Your worst or your less effective answers drifted into your class and achievement answer, and I mentioned that already. Okay, so things that were quite generic about cultural deprivation, material deprivation, labelling processes, and what they needed to do was make sure that they were linking back to an ethnic group to show how it was impacting that ethnic group's achievement. Weaker answers also had evaluation by juxtaposition, so here's some internal factors, however there's also external factors, and using that to evaluate, and it's really the lowest effective way of evaluating. But your better evaluation were the students work very critical throughout the answer and they developed it through. And the majority of students had conclusions that were not evaluative and largely just a recap of previous points, so they did not score well. So massive thank you for watching as always. If you have found it useful, please click that like button. Any questions, comments, pop them below, and check out some of my other videos from this series of paper 1 2019. I've already done the 4 mark, the 6 mark, the 10 mark. Next video will be the 20 methods in context. So thank you so much, and I shall see you soon.